Hello there. The SNP leader in Westminster, Ian Blackford, has doubled down on his party's anti-nuclear weapon policy, claiming that nuclear deterrence doesn't work. Ian Blackford says nuclear weapons don't deter, but it seems Russian nukes are deterring his party holding a referendum, as he comes out today saying that due to the Ukraine crisis, any IndyRef 2 will have to wait until after 2023. The SNP leader in Westminster, Ian Blackford, has reinforced his party's anti-nuclear weapons stance by demanding that the UK Trident weapon system be removed from the Faslane Naval Base and Coulport in West Scotland. He claims that they must go because there is a threat to the world from nuclear weapons. This came in response to being asked by the PA news agency if the Ukraine conflict had changed his view on the matter. In fact, Blackford said it was far-fetched to think that having nuclear weapons was a deterrent. But he does want an independent Scotland to join NATO and claims NATO would want Scotland as a member due to its strategic importance. Makes it sound like he wants to kick UK Trident out, but maybe welcome US or French nuclear weapons instead, or maybe fleets of US ships and flights of US fighter jets and bombers. Anyway, in NATO, an independent Scotland would therefore enjoy the safety provided by its nuclear umbrella for no cost, and while not having nukes in Scotland. Major hypocrisy alert. Now, had nuclear weapons never existed, war between East and West would no doubt have broken out in Europe in the late 1940s. Check out Operation Unthinkable. And in such a scenario, it is hard to see how the European Union could have developed in the way it has. Initially, the sheer weight of armed forces in Europe after the Second World War stopped either side taking the chance. But by the 1950s, it was the possession of nuclear weapons by both sides that in the end kept an uneasy peace and prevented war in Europe. And the West outspent the USSR on weapons and won the Cold War. And we thought it was all over when the Berlin Wall fell and the USSR crumbled away. Peace in our time across Europe, and the push for disarmament came, with the money not being spent on defence being viewed as a peace dividend, which has just been frittered away. So much for that peace dividend, as Putin's tanks now roll across Ukraine, and probably in time into Moldova, as Putin seeks to rebuild the Soviet-era buffer zone between Russia and what he says is a threatening NATO. And I reckon right now that with no Russian or NATO nuclear weapons, our troops would already be fighting in Ukraine and be spilling out across the continent. The only thing stopping a major European war is that Putin has made it quite clear that he would press the button if we interfere in what he says is a drive to safeguard Russian security. And as there is a chance he would do so, the West in the form of NATO is deterred from getting actively involved militarily. The Russian nukes are deterring the West from putting one NATO boot on Ukrainian ground or one aircraft in the air over Ukraine. And hopefully NATO nukes are keeping any wider geographical ambitions that Putin might have in check. And Ukraine is probably now regretting its decision to give up its nukes in the late 1990s via the Budapest Memorandum in return for territorial assurances from both Russia and the West, which have not been honoured. And what does Ukraine see now? Belarus to the north agreeing to scrap its nuclear-free policy and host Russian nuclear weapons. And according to one source that can no longer be viewed in the UK, President Zelensky of Ukraine has again called for a no-fly zone to be imposed over his country, saying, All the alliance could do today was pass on its allocated 50 tons of diesel for Ukraine, probably so we can burn the Budapest Memorandum. All the people who die will die because of you from this day on. Now, if Putin wins this, Ukraine might well be armed with Russian nuclear weapons. And if Zelensky wins, I would bet on it becoming a nuclear power now anyway. And I wonder how many countries out there are now thinking actively about arming themselves. And I shudder to think what would have happened had Russia been the only nuclear power on the planet. The rest of us would be powerless to resist. So to claim that nuclear weapons don't act as a deterrent is an absolute nonsense, as amply demonstrated by Ian Blackford wanting an independent Scotland to benefit from that ultimate protection, that being a member of NATO offers. But hoping that if it all kicks off, they will not be a direct target for nuclear weapons themselves because they haven't got any, but be defended by those who do put their money on the table and their heads above the parapet. A cynical and hypocritical position for Blackford to take.